Hey, welcome back to Enchanted's Kitchen. So if you're looking to make a dim sum spread at home, definitely don't forget the Gok or the fried taro puff. It's so fun to eat and instantly recognizable with that crispy, crunchy, almost lace-like appearance to the exterior that really stands out against all the steamed dumplings on your dim sum table. And of course it has that rich, meaty pork and mushroom filling. So speaking of filling, you do need to make the filling first so that way it has some time to cool down before you fill your dumplings. So just take a large skillet of some sort or a wok and place it over medium-high heat, adding 2 tablespoons of oil. And then once that oil is hot, you want to add your meat. And like I said in the intro, I am using pork, which is traditional for Gok or fried taro dumplings. But of course, you could substitute out some beef or chicken thighs or whatever type of protein that you prefer. And you see there, I just had some pork loins or pork chops that I diced up into fine dice, so that way it's easily stuffable inside your dumpling. So here I just added some minced shiitake mushrooms, which were dried and I just rehydrated in hot boiling water and then minced up. And also adding 1 yellow onion, just diced, and go ahead and stir that, cooking over about medium-high heat, and just cover it and cook until those onions are mostly translucent. And then once your onions are mostly translucent and cooked, you want to add some fresh minced garlic, just about 2 cloves will be good. And also a few dashes of white pepper, but of course you can substitute out black pepper if you prefer, or no pepper if you don't like pepper. And for additional spice, I am going to add a heaping teaspoon of a Chinese spice, and just go ahead and stir that to coat every bit of meat. And you might notice here I didn't add any salt yet, but you'll see soon why I didn't add any additional salt, just because we're going to be adding a lot of other salty elements to this filling. So speaking of salt, I'm going to be adding some fermented black bean sauce, roughly 1 tablespoon, along with a rough 1 tablespoon of hoisin sauce. And honestly, these 2 ingredients are not traditional to, Gok. I saw that a lot of recipes online call for oyster sauce, but I just didn't have any oyster sauce on hand this day, and I was not about to go to the store just for oyster sauce. So I ended up using the combination of black bean sauce and hoisin sauce, which honestly was just as delicious. You get a little bit of that sweet element from the hoisin sauce, and of course a little bit of salty from the black bean sauce. In addition to the black bean sauce, I am adding just a couple dashes of a light soy sauce, along with a couple dashes of a Chinese cooking wine, just for added flavor. And then just go ahead and stir to combine, so that way your meat can be evenly coated in those sauces. And then once your meat is all coated in these sauces, we're going to add some chicken stock, or of course you could substitute out some water if that's all you have. And I noticed here on camera my chicken stock looks almost like orange juice, which trust me it isn't, because that wouldn't be very tasty. And the idea here is you want to add a little bit of liquid to create a sauce, which you're going to thicken, and that way it can evenly coat your pork. And so speaking of thickeners, I'm going to be using some cornstarch to make a slurry. Essentially, a slurry is just a combination of cornstarch, just 1 tablespoon, along with 1 tablespoon of a light soy sauce and a 1/4 cup of a chicken stock, just making sure the chicken stock is nice and cold. That way your cornstarch can easily dissolve as you're stirring it. And this is going to help, again, thicken that chicken stock that we added earlier. And that way the sauce can be nice and thick and not watery, and can just evenly coat the pieces of pork. And do keep in mind that cornstarch, even though it pretty much seizes up and thickens as soon as it hits that hot liquid, it does need some time to cook. That way it can reach its full thickening capacity. So it takes a total of about 3 minutes to cook. At this point, just go ahead and turn your heat off, and once your cornstarch has boiled for 3 minutes, and you're pretty much done with the filling. I just added, maybe a tablespoon or so of some minced chives for some brightness, both in color and flavor. You could add some cilantro, like fresh chopped cilantro, or you can just omit it altogether, totally up to you. But basically your filling is done, and you want to go ahead and refrigerate it while you make your dough. So speaking of dough, of course we need some taro root, because this is in fact taro dumplings or fried taro puffs. So I found this peeled and ready prepared, ready to go, cleaned and everything, taro root at my local Filipino market. But of course, if you don't want to spend the money on that, you could just take a raw piece of taro like you see there with the skins and all, and then just go ahead and rinse it really well and peel it just like you would like a potato for a mashed potato. So you want to peel it clean and free of all those brown pieces of skin. And then rinse it off again and chop it up. Basically just chop it into even pieces so it can steam up evenly. And in terms of the amount of taro that you need, you want to aim for about 1.5 pounds of taro. and you see me there just measuring it in the pan that I'm going to steam the taro in. I just took, again, a large skillet. It's really pretty straightforward here, just steaming the taro in a large skillet. Of course, I think some recipes say that you can do this in a microwave with a wet towel on top, but either way, it doesn't really matter. It just takes a few minutes to steam. In the meantime, while we're waiting, we're going to prepare the rest of the ingredients for the dough, and that includes 130 grams of a wheat starch, which you can find at most Asian supermarkets. And you also want to add equal portions by weight of hot boiling water, so it's 130 milligrams or 130 milliliters of hot boiling water. And you just want to stir it up as best as you can. Of course, on this day that I was filming, I used way too small of a bowl, and I couldn't get my hands quite in there yet because the water, of course, was boiling hot. So I just used that fork just to get it started, but it ended up kind of being a clumpy mess. And eventually, once the mixture cooled down, I just got my hands in there and started kneading it, making sure to really run my fingers through that dough to make sure that there's no dry pockets of wheat starch and that it's completely combined. Every bit of starch is moistened and hydrated, and eventually after a few minutes of kneading, really doesn't take much work or effort, you should have a consistency of about Play-Doh. So once you have that edible Play-Doh on your hands, you want to go ahead and set that aside. And in the meantime, go ahead and measure out the remaining ingredients, which includes some coconut oil. So I actually use coconut oil, which I don't think that's traditional, probably not. Probably more traditional would be shortening or lard, probably lard. So, it's up to you which type of fat. You basically need a solid fat, and I don't think, unfortunately, butter would work here just because butter does contain a certain percentage of water, whereas coconut oil or shortening or lard, they're basically 100% pure solid fat. So, it's your choice of fat. So you can use coconut oil like I did, or you can use shortening or lard. And at this point, hopefully your taro has cooked all the way through. Just make sure to double check using the tip of a knife, just like you would checking for mashed potatoes. You need that same consistency for a nice smooth taro dough. You want to make sure that knife easily pierces through that taro with hardly any effort. And what might be a good idea in the future, so I might note it for myself, is actually mixing this taro in my stand mixer using the paddle attachment and just kind of mix it on high, not only to break up the pieces of taro, but also to help release some of that steam and allow it to cool a lot faster. And the reason why that taro needs to be cooled is because it needs to be incorporated into your coconut oil. So of course, if you add like hot taro that's just been steamed straight into the bowl with the coconut oil, it's just going to melt the coconut oil and you just have a really soupy mess on your hand. Unfortunately, on this day, I found that my coconut oil was just being very stubborn, and perhaps my taro was a little bit too cold because it was particularly cold this day that I was making this dough. And a lot of the coconut oil was very difficult to incorporate, which you'll see later, and you'll see how I kind of combated that and eventually helped to incorporate that coconut oil. So here I'm just adding the clumps of wheat starch, the dough that we made earlier with the hot boiling water and the wheat starch. I just broke it up like prematurely and then just kneaded it in with my hands. That way I found it's a lot easier to incorporate evenly if you distribute it first, and then just go ahead and squeeze it. It's not really kneading, it's literally just squeezing it in between your hands, and it's pretty no nonsense, like very low fuss, I think, and pretty straightforward. Just want to knead it until it's all combined and it's basically just a homogeneous dough. And you'll see there, like I'm trying to show you here, like clumps of coconut oil that again was very, very stubborn, and I literally had to break it apart in my warm fingers to help incorporate it a lot easier into the dough. So I found that instead of just doing that in the bowl, I found that just dumping the entire dough onto my work surface and then using the palm of my hand and kneading it or putting more force into it using my upper body helped to really incorporate that coconut oil into that dough, like essentially just smashing it and smearing it in. So, it's not the fanciest method, but it definitely works. And you may have noticed that I did not season my taro, so at this point it should be quite bland. In order to add more flavor, of course, you're just going to add about half a teaspoon of salt, along with about half a teaspoon of granulated white sugar. And you won't really taste it, the sweetness from the sugar, but again, just to balance out the flavors between the salt and, of course, the salty element from that filling as well. So at this point, your dough is pretty much done and you're good to go, and we're going to move forward with making the actual dumpling. So you can actually make both of these steps. You can make the dough, you can make the filling on separate days, and then on the day that you plan to cook your taro dumplings, you could just roll and shape your dumplings, which really hardly take any effort or skill. So luckily for me, so I went ahead and just took about 1-inch size ball of dough, rolled it out to about 1/4 of an inch thick, and then once it's a flat circle, I just filled it with my filling and roughly about 1/2 tablespoon or so. Just really depends on how large your dumpling is going to be, and that will determine how much filling you decide to add. But I try to err on the side of a little bit more modest with my filling because I just don't want any risk of my dumpling, exploding in the fryer. So that's quite important. So just go ahead and fill your dumpling with your filling. And like I said, it really takes hardly any skill to make or to shape these wugok. You just basically want to press it together to create a half crescent moon shape. And do make sure, I guess one key tip that you don't want to forget is to really seal it well. Take your fingers, like your index finger and your thumb, and really pinch the seam to close it so there's no risk of it opening as it's frying. And at this point, again, my room temperature this day was very chilly, very cool, so I didn't feel a need to really refrigerate my dumplings, but I do recommend just to make sure that it holds its shape as it's going into that hot oil as you fry it at 340 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't want it too hot because then you have issues with the crust not forming and kind of being a big mess. So you want to aim for 340 degrees Fahrenheit, and definitely using a thermometer like a candy thermometer or a deep fried thermometer certainly helps. So basically, like most fried things, and I haven't really fried too many things in my lifetime because I'm not huge on eating a lot of fried oily food, but we all know that nice golden brown color that's so delicious, and it's just beckoning you to eat it. So, and you can see there that crispy, crunchy, such a unique texture to this dumpling, which I think makes it stand out and more enticing to people. And of course it's deep fried, so why wouldn't it taste good? But it's just so beautiful, and it's so unique, and like I said, fun to eat. Just a little bit messy, but that's part of the fun. That's part of the charm with eating wugok. So if you try this recipe, definitely let me know in the comments down below what you think. Don't forget to hit subscribe, I appreciate it. The like button, notification bell to get notified every time I post a new recipe. And don't forget to share this recipe as well for anyone that you think might enjoy some wugok in their life. And yeah, I'll see you back here next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.